Hello and most welcome to 791. Today's lecture of the H series called Practice as the Key to the Lock. I spoke earlier about the philosopher Locke, and I felt it to be a very good metaphor for where the lock is. And I was talking about opening the lock, but for opening the lock we could need a key as well. So this is my take on a modern key. And remember once more what I mentioned in 790. There is usually some sort of dividing going on, and then you have a prioritizing. I didn't manage to spell that right. And then you have a marginalization or marginalizing going on. This is the magical movements that starts the lock. We need as well some sort of magic to open the lock. And in this example, the division is the very Western practice and theory. Practice was something castigated already by the Greek. They said we should have something pure, not something involving body or doing things or action. I remember both Plato and Aristotle castigating, for instance, theater or theatrical affects, music, lighting, food, similar things. They should all be gone from the discourse. It should be nothing of the material left. And this division makes it today in Western society certain unique tendencies. In our educational system, only in the West, only in this very, very isolated case, we don't put any tension into how we sit, not how we poise ourselves. The body is castigated. The body is just pure matter. It doesn't have an intelligence. It doesn't have an understanding. There's no knowledge coming from the body. Something that in the rest of the whole world would be considered completely absurd. Balance doesn't seem to be important either. How we balance is unimportant. If I'm balanced when I speak or when I think or when I learn, part of the point. As you hear, this is in a way really strange things to see, but we have a long tradition of that, and it's today so well established it's usually taken for granted. Health, that's another thing. How are we sort of supporting the body? That's not part of the thing. It's assumed that the thinking process is taking place in this weird part of the sphere that we divided arbitrarily. It's an arbitrary division, and in this sphere it's no connection to reality. It's not situated anywhere. It's not localized. It doesn't do anything. It's high above the body. And in this process of dividing, later theorizing came to be prioritized on the marginalization of the body. So it was thought that the more we castigated and throw down the body, the more we mistreated the body, the better it went. And that tendency went so far that our educational places look horrible because they want to cast down the feeling. The body should be hurt even. And the better they are hurt, the less oxygen, the less air, light, nice smell, nice things for vision, like aesthetics. The less of that we have, the more we sort of hurt the body, making it impossible to grow and to understand and feel, the better it is. And there should be nothing stimulating in the environment, something that All the rest of the world thinks it's completely horrifying, especially in learned, educated places. Stimulated gardens, plants, drawings, pictures, paintings are exceedingly important. I was checking out in one place in Kyoto in Japan, half of the budget was spent on those things because we know them to be exceedingly important. So in a way, and this is another take on why do we have these strange philosophical ideas? How come John Searle put this idea, not only him, but other people as well, the idea that we are only a brain in the vat? The reason is because we've been castigating the body. In the end, we cannot feel the body anymore. We are trying to turn ourselves into this famous brain in the vats by hurting the body, making our health as deteriorated possibly as possible. And I think one of the visionaries in that idea was Descartes himself. He really hurted his body his whole life, and he often was perceived as a person with a really bad body health and a complete lack of balance. And it was used such words in Swedish as not so slug, not so sly. Well, it doesn't really translate good, but he was lacking cunningness, he was lacking this cleverness in his body. And this tendency is really, really weird. And let me take an example I've taken before, but I'm going to put it in another angle. This is an example I think is extraordinary how far one can go, and there are or were no objections. This is this Italian phrase once more, correggiamente, or what was it?
Aggiornamento.
Aggiornamento. It took place in 1962 to 1965 in Rome, more specifically in the Vatican. It was a castigating more of the body. It was a castigating of practice as well. All practice should go. And whereas in the convents and monasteries they were practicing maybe 5, 6, 7, 8. It was depending which order, but it was many, many hours. It could be up to 10 hours a day. That was castigated. It was seen as an extra, something that was a supplement. And that's another way of using the word supplement. And here is in the less constructive way. You have a whole, but you seem to be thinking that a part of that whole is extra and it needs to be ridden of. Almost like you start perceiving your arm to be, well, I have 2 arms, that may be one too many. And it doesn't hold to logic, you reason. Why should I have 2 arms? And some languages arms don't even have plural. It's the same in singular and plural. And that could be reason to cut off an arm. This is actually what was done. The body was cut off. And it was done by hardly any resistance. The resistance was more of just being mainly conservative, not having any good arguments why it should be so. And of course, in the theoretical part, they were at an advantage. They had all the arguments, they had all the words already. The practice doesn't have anything to defend itself with. It's not verbal in that way. And the liturgy, the ceremony, the hymns, all this learned behavior by the body, this knowledge wave, as we call it today, the wave that contains all the knowledge, that was castigated. It should be ridded, take it away, eradicate it, take it away. And this was actually enforced, although they directly had indication that it made the people affected sick. That did not matter. It was even some people saying that was proof it was good, because the body is a bad thing. And people even died from this. Especially in some monasteries by the Dominicans, where they only slept 5 to 6 hours. The ceremonial practice was invigorating the body, putting balance into it. When they took away, they got sick and some even perished. But that was seen from the theory part as proof. Just the thing that the body suffered even more went to show the body is the bad thing, and now it suffer really bad. Let's do it even more. But in a way, and this is the different take, we can understand that because all the argument is here. So without an argument, how in these conciliums could the first secretary, together with his assistant secretary, and all the congregations and all these discourse, how could they, so to speak, argue in the direction of keeping practice? Because I said practice doesn't have words, doesn't have arguments. And I think this is an important point. Nobody said anything, and that was not caused by cowardice, and I would say that wasn't caused by lack of energy of doing it. It was caused by there wasn't any theory or argument, or maybe, as Ian McGilchrist would put it, maybe a little bit clumsy, there was no left hemisphere thing to say. And in a way, the second way, or my second time at looking at this second concilium as well, my second time at looking at the second concilium, I sort of start to think I wouldn't have said anything different when I was there. Because where on earth would I get the argument of defending this thing? How on earth could I make up in my head or find out in my head how to defend it? And I would have to be objective and honest and say, I could not. And I think there is only one acceptance. Only one. And this is what I mean with the key. Because every key is unique. You have to have exactly the right key to exactly the right lock. So we all both need the right lock. Now we need to find the right lock, because it could be situated anywhere. But we also need the right key. It's sort of, we need to find out where the problem is. Maybe that's thanks to Ian McGilchrist and other people. Of course, Barbara Tversky. And others have been very helpful. So they have sort of spoken about the lock, and you need to sort of find these contours. How does it look, the lock? Here is not a problem, here is the problem. You sort of get a bodily and theoretical grasp of where the lock is. I think we've done that. I think we've done that pretty good, because I've spoken to some other people. Hang on a second. We've spoken to some other people, and our colleague in Stockholm, who's just watching this, he gave us some indications, some understanding had come already over the YouTube, which I think is quite extraordinary. Because it's not easy to grasp these things. They're very hard to grasp. We've been putting a lot of time into this to really get an understanding, and In reality, these YouTube clips are just a condensed format of all the reading and all the thinking and all the work. So how easy is it to get an understanding from that? Apparently it has worked. So I'd say the lock is in place. But I did not realize until quite recently it needs to be a specific key. And that key can only be one. And that key is the only thing in human history that has shown us in a way that goes down to the bottom, up to the head, and covers everything, that practice is a necessity. And that, my friends, I'm going to do Rome here. This is not a very good picture of Rome here. And that information, that argument would have been the only one that could have entered into the concilium to the first secretaries and their helpers and changed this process. It's only one thing. So I was wrong in thinking that anything or common reason could have helped this situation. It could not. And I also start to agree with the people who said it doesn't matter if the body is hurting, because if you are in this theoretical argument, you need contradictory argument to have a conversation. You cannot just raise yourself out of the chair inside the Vatican and say, I don't agree. And you have, like, there was a lot of people there, 150, 200, listen to you, and they will stand like this and say, so what is your argument? What do you have to say for yourself? And then you just, I don't know, I don't like it. That wouldn't cut the cheese. It wouldn't do the trick. It needs to be an argument. So even if we want to defend practice, we cannot do it by practice alone. It needs something a bit more theoretical. And I realize that key, and this is an example I put up because I mentioned it before, but this applies to the body, all other things as well. Not only this is the example for today, but that very key is quantum mechanics. Otherwise, it would not have been accepted. I don't mean it would have been accepted, but it would have been a chance. Because it needs to be presented in the correct way. It needs to be convinced, it needs to be in the right terms and all that. But that is the only thing that could have worked, potentially. And this is why I think quantum mechanics is so incredibly important to be put into the lock. And that's why our mission for health, for instance, need quantum mechanics to tell people there is also a logical reason, theoretical reason, speaking to the left hemisphere, telling it, hello left hemisphere, we have very good reasons to believe that even in practice, even in physics, practice is needed, because every experiment in quantum and mechanics is unique, and it needs to be a person there doing the thing. The observer dependence. The observer dependence of quantum mechanics is the only thing that could sort of resolve this, to turn the tide. And I'd say this is in 1962. I'd say this has gone even further today. If it were to be Vatican Concilium number 3, it would be even harder to reach people. But I'm, as of today, 100% sure to opening the whole thing, to get people to get slightly interested in practice. Quantum mechanics is the only key. And it needs to be made understandable. That's our mission. to do it understandable. And then we have the second leap, the second run, and I'm not going to mention it here, we mentioned it before, that's the practice. That's the practice. But first, we need to get people to start to get interested, to get into the thinking. And we need to reach the left hemisphere. And maybe in this case, I don't know, but maybe somehow I disagree with Ian McGilchrist, God forbid. But I think quantum mechanics is strong enough, it has physics. Everybody knows that physics is the foundation of the world in some way. That's an argument is very, very hard to beat. And I checked a little earlier here on the internet, and many big religious leaders, for instance the Pope himself, and not only him, also the leaders of Buddhism, what's his name? I would like to say
Dalai Lama.
Yeah, for some reason I want to say Ayatollah Khomeini, but maybe him as well. Maybe the leaders of Islam. And I have a very hard time to think that the religious leaders and the secular leaders of Judaism would say no, because at least 30% of the scientists in quantum mechanics were either religious Jews or secular Jews. So I think this is the key. And it is a lock and key movement. We need to find the lock. And it doesn't lend itself to easily definition, because it needs to be felt more. It's a very hard thing to sort of characterize. And there, I think Ian McGilchrist did an utmost excellent job. And every time I study a little bit in his very extensive book, I learn a little bit more. I sort of learn how to identify it, both bodily and theoretically, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense. You need to get a grip on that. But the most important thing is that we now have sort of identified it's necessary with the key as well. And I didn't really thought about that. I saw in front of myself, I saw the word objection in the Vatican Concilium, but I didn't think so far to see how that objection should play out. But now when I've done it, I'd say it has to be this one. It definitely have to be quantum mechanics. And this makes it so more important that we sort of conclude our mission and make quantum mechanics understandable for both laymen and professionals. It's incredibly important, because that is the key that can lend a first interest into practice once more, so we can heal. So this horrible division, because this division, of course, as we know from Derrida and deconstruction, it does hurt theory as well. You cannot castigate things and marginalize things. You can't cut off your arm and feel that you're not suffering. You will suffer. This cutting off is detrimental every time when it's done. But it's a little bit like we did not have a choice before quantum mechanics. We didn't. So these people cannot be blamed. In a way, can point fingers at them, but we need to point those fingers at ourselves as well, because we are all learning, and whether it's in the Vatican, where it's in Mecca or in the yeshiva, wherever you go, you need to sort of get an understanding of this. And this is the key that will change everything. That is my vision of today. And I will now terminate this rather melodramatic lecture, but I'm really, really happy that the key is found. And I say, please do have a very pleasant afternoon, and thank you very much.
Thank you.